you're drawn to it.
New York will come back, be built a little bit like the phoenix. It'll rise from its ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll give New York a certain chance to I won't say start over, but to recreate itself as an even better place.
I love that. I say that a lot, and you sometimes get looks from people, but I have to believe that that's what's going to happen, that New York will become something else.
When Citizens was founded, New York City was mired in one of the worst financial crises in its history. And that now famous advertisement that our founder, Oz Elliott, placed in the New York Times produced over 10,000 caring neighbors. Everyone pitched in as city services were slashed, and that's the proud beginning of this organization.
Today, we're in the midst of crisis, and we need to step up. And we've seen it before, that when average, everyday New Yorkers come together, they can make amazing things happen. They can create places that have been left behind. They can bring them forward.
40 years ago, New York City was on the verge of bankruptcy. The New York Times, writing about that period not long ago, said that the difference between solvency and insolvency was paper thin. New York is very different today, arguably the most diverse and interesting city in the world. We don't claim credit for that transformation, but we do proudly claim credit for being there in 1975 when things were so difficult for the city.
New Yorkers are the toughest people in the world. So when I hear folks say that New York is dead, New York is over, cities persist, and New York is the greatest city in the world. So that is not the truth.
New York City is said to be a metropolis, forever chasing progress and perfection, but it is lately best at making do with the reality of considerably less.
All In for New York City says it all. We are going to do everything that we can to make sure that the greatest city in the world always wins and continues to win, and that everybody gets to celebrate in that victory. Good afternoon and welcome to another Citizens NYC live event. We are reimagining and talking about rebuilding New York City. I'm Dr. Rasan Harris, CEO of Citizens Committee for New York City, and we are really thankful that you are spending your lunch hour with us. Want to make sure that you follow us on Facebook, that you follow us on Instagram, that you share what we're doing with a friend at Citizens NYC. Today is a very special conversation because we are at a critical point in New York City in the arc of the dual pandemics that we're facing. New York City public schools recently shut down, and it looks like there will be a little bit more of a lockdown in how we engage businesses. And businesses are definitely the lifeblood of communities and the economy. And when we don't invest in businesses, it affects individuals who have to make a living. It affects communities that don't necessarily have access to resources. And we are really proud that Citizens Committee for New York City was able to invest in a new program, which is the Neighborhood Business Program, where we asked people to show us how they are pivoting their business and their business model in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and what are they doing to stay in business, and what is the impact of their business on their community. And in particular, we had a priority. All are welcome to apply, but a priority on people of color-led businesses, women-led businesses, businesses that are run by people who are immigrants and have recently come to the United States of America. Because we recognize that investment in these types of businesses pre-pandemic wasn't where we would like it to be. And we wanted to make sure that these businesses that were vulnerable, if they weren't able to pivot and didn't get the investment, had a chance to be able to be the backbone of their community, and we are here to help that. So today's conversation will allow us to explore neighborhood businesses, and in particular, as you can see from my shirt, different businesses that are started by different folks who have different backgrounds can bring you different types of results. So there's a Black woman that has YepRacismSucks.com as a website. Around the time when George Floyd was murdered and people are lifting their voices to talk about there's a need for unity and there's a need to denounce hate. I was lucky enough to find this sweatshirt and be able to help a woman-owned business, a Black woman-owned business by my patronage. And I hope that we think about ways as we're going through this conversation of how we can help businesses so they can thrive, so the communities that they represent can thrive too. So our panelists, we have Pat Miller-Zoller, who is an investments expert. So she will let us know how people make decisions of where they're putting their money and how we should think about this in the larger macro context. She is a managing director at Neuberger Berman, and we're really excited to have her macro view about opportunity and access to opportunity and capital. And we also have another special guest, Lauren Coleman, an AI startup founder and activist who was one of the recipients of our neighborhood business grants, the first round of grants that we gave out. And so I'm excited to have two Black women who are absolutely, let's celebrate it, who are going to talk about how we leverage our money and leverage our investment so that all can thrive. So I wanted to start first and foremost with an opportunity, Pat, for you to introduce yourself in the way that you want people to know you and how you're entering into this conversation.
Sure. Well, absolutely. I'm Pat Miller-Zoller, and I am delighted to be here. I've been in the investments field now for almost 30 years, and the last 15 of those years specifically focused on private equity investing. I think private equity investing is a fantastic career, primarily because it's a way to really support businesses, find businesses, grow businesses, add value, and create these opportunities for entrepreneurs really across the world in a way that really just focuses on how do you add value. I'm specifically interested in actually being a part of this conversation because as I hear and know about the history, Dr. Harris, of CitizensNYC, it is very clear that it is the moment for this, for such a time as this, is really kind of the moment that we find ourselves in. And organizations like yours and conversations like this is exactly what we need here.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. And Lauren, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, happy to, and so excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. So as Dr. Harris said, my name is Lauren Delisa Coleman, and I am an entrepreneur and an activist. I think as many of us are even before, COVID, and now certainly deeper into it. So first, in terms of the entrepreneurial side, I have a concept marketing company that is called Link Agency. It's spelled phonetically, LNK. It's here in the Hudson Yards, Chelsea area. Essentially, we are a concept marketing and trend research company. And crazy enough, as timing happens, I was also in the process of, and still, working on spinning out part of this expertise for what will be one of the first ever AI-driven media companies around trends, pop culture trends, and more, which I am super excited about. Just before the pandemic, I was looking at as well starting kind of initiative to be able to help. Well, really, it's led by Black women for all women of color who are looking to be kind of more part of what I call the pop culture innovation economy. That is the intersection of entertainment, media, and technology. We know this area is crucial because it controls the flow of information and more. And not enough of us are executives in this space, entrepreneurs in this space, and I so wanted to be able to help change that. having to just, kind of scrap and scrape through it through almost all my career. And I, was just started this right before the pandemic, and then like, okay, of course, companies weren't interested, and then all the George Floyd scenario happened, and now it seems to be, just the right time. So I'm just really excited about being able to, just bring this to the forefront, and I'm just so very thankful to have been able to be a recipient of the grant, I guess back in the summer, right, Dr. Harris, from Citizens, which is a very, very large part of how I'm here to be able to talk with you today about, being able to do this, because I think too often, and we'll get into this during the conversation, I'm sure, women of color are typically, we're treading water like every day, so that you don't really have time enough to drill down into what it is that you're doing. A lot of that is, because of lack of financial resources, lack of the right number of contracts, etc. So whenever you are able to help a woman of color who is an entrepreneur financially, it gives us the ability to breathe a bit and be able to go on ahead and like kind of blossom what it is that we're actually working on, as opposed to always looking at every bill that needs to be paid, every day, which, all entrepreneurs do, but it's nice to have a balance. And we oftentimes, just have not historically. I think now we all have a golden opportunity to be able to change that, because now what I have said and so many other individuals have said separately is now like a part of the collective narrative, and I'm really excited to push that as far and fast ahead as I can. So yeah, I'm happy to be able to be included today, and just so grateful for what you guys are doing.
Awesome. So one question I want to start with Lauren, and then it's going to go to Pat. Entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur inherently has a risk. So Lauren, talk to me about what gave you the courage to take that risk, and what were the calculations that you had that made you say that, yes, this is something I want to do. And Pat, I'm going to get you teed up on thinking about investing in entrepreneurial efforts, or investing in making investment decisions, like what goes into, providing capital to help efforts, and like what are investments decisions kind of based off of. So it's going to be two sides, from the individual standpoint, and then from the institutional standpoint that potentially spurs or starves entrepreneurship, so to speak.
Well, I think there's always that question of, can entrepreneurs be made, or are they born, whatever. I personally think, you can make them or us, but that's just really my innate personality. I didn't fit very well into corporate structure. I started my, official career after graduating from Columbia at Viacom, at MTV Networks, back when, there were real videos and all that. There weren't very many, almost no people of color there. And it was very, very challenging. Not to say that I couldn't have met the challenges, but it just kind of seemed to flow almost organically, to be able to start to want to do more proof of concept on my own. I was there for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity to work at what was at the time one of the most prominent marketing companies in the music industry. When Snoop Dogg dropped, Doggy Style, Dre's seminal albums and so much more, well beyond, before Eminem, Tribes, Midnight Marauders, all of that was like kind of farmed out from the majors, because they had no idea what to do with this crazy new thing called hip hop, which was blowing up. So I worked there for a little while, and then I just, like I said, had different ideas around branding, concept marketing, connecting with people, which is always a through line of what I'm doing. 18 to 24, 34. And I just had said to that owner at a certain point, what if you pay me half and I work half the time? And he just heard pay me half and was like, great. And I had the smallest studio probably in the world in Soho at the time. And one of my previous coworkers at that company got a gig at Virgin Records, and he was like, if you start your marketing company, I'll hire you. I'll make sure that we're one of your first clients, because I know that you hold it down. When you say you're going to do something, you do it, which is very much me. And it just kind of took off from there. It was very natural, and I guess that's kind of how I made that transition. And so I think it's very important, although, I certainly respect those in kind of the investment space and all that, who have these structures and all that. And especially as I start to interact with such people now, looking at, very significant potential investments for my startup, because I'm moving from kind of a service kind of driven business to that which is a real, product, right? They have a lot of structure going on, and does it have traction? Is it this or that? I don't really necessarily believe that that's how things actually always happen. It is a lot of what you feel is right, what is to kind of be part of what is the kind of need or the void at the moment, if it is truly something that you're a part of. I think the challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs have is that there are too many of them that kind of say, oh, well, I was in this industry before, but I see a way to fill a void in that industry. And so I think I'm going to go create this thing and do it and pivot and imagine it as it goes along, because I don't really know it. I don't really come from that space, but I just see a way that a problem to be solved. Yeah, that way is going to mess it up. And you probably are going to have to reimagine them many different times and all that. I've talked to different entrepreneurs in the blockchain space who have amazing problem solving capabilities for the music industry specifically. Blockchain and the music industry, they go hand in hand, but they know nothing about the music industry, the culture of it, how, people don't really trust those outside of the industry. And it's just so much about it. So yeah, then they had to pivot and go and take that same problem solving technique and put it elsewhere. I think investor would probably be pretty nervous about that, right? Because that's not how it's supposed to work. And so I think when you have somebody like me who's been well entrenched in the space and simply leveraging or putting emerging technologies such as AI on top of it, you kind of have to fight through those types of challenges, with investors, in addition to the fact that you might not, fit that pattern matching thing that a lot of them have, because media kind of portrays the younger Caucasian male as those who are a genius, and that is, thank God, shifting, but not completely. We just see things which are unfair, but I don't think they're necessarily, I hope, not done, on purpose. I think that sometimes, there's a lot around relationship. I don't know how many people are familiar with this company called Magic Leap, which raised millions upon millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia, from here in the US, and so much more. And, I have no problem saying to investors who will say to me about my company, well, let's talk when we have traction. And I always like to say to them, well, how do you think Magic Leap got all of that money before they actually had any traction at all? And now have caved, right? If you even Google right now, you'll see that they had to allegedly pivot. But it was going to be the best thing ever and on the cover of Time and all this stuff before they had one customer. I think it's important to have different types of dialogue with investors because I feel like too often they position things as like they know everything, and this part of the deck isn't right and that part isn't right. And you'll talk to another one and you'll get a completely different point of view. I think entrepreneurs are very special people because we have to be incredibly strong about our visions while also being diplomatic and staying true to what it is that in your heart is right. That there's a need for this. You either lived it yourself or you've talked with a lot of people, you've worked within this industry and been an expert in it. And then you have to kind of just trust that you will continue to find the right people who will help you execute that vision. If you're a young entrepreneur, say in your early 20s or something, that's going to be very hard to do. I guess I feel very fortunate to be able to do this now, my third business at this age, because I can go toe to toe with whoever is talking and ask them, where are you getting those ideas from, right? And what actually have you done that's, kind of going to help me to really also have faith in you as that investor who's going to bring something to the table aside from just financial capital, right?
So Pat, you really, Lauren brought up a lot of points that I think might factor into decisions about who to invest in, and I'm going to try to parse them out. So number one, soundness of the idea and knowing the industry that you're in, because Lauren brought up, hey, I know this one thing well, but if I go into this space, then I think I'll change the world, but not necessarily having an exact knowledge of getting it done. So I'm assuming an investor might ding you on not having the due diligence in that. Another thing that she said was interesting, which is the other part, is, certain people, of the way they look and their gender, are seen as acceptable, and we are kind of conditioned to think, oh yeah, you're the type of person I need to invest in for this thing because you fit the prototype. So how do you get an investment that doesn't make the same groupthink mistakes of the past and just not giving things a fair share? And then lastly, how do you talk? I mean, and again, this is like the 50,000-foot view, but an entrepreneur can be so passionate of knowing what they know. Like, how do you sort through from a larger level of like the passion from the basic fundamentals, and then the X factor of figuring out like who to take a chance on or not?
Absolutely. No, I think those are all really good points and questions. So, it's very interesting. Is the last point that you were talking about around passion. I think that's the starting point around, where where you're going to find great businesses, but it's really just where you start. And in fact, one of the things that you want to see, and one of the reasons why investing in entrepreneurs is especially attractive, is because you come with this passion, right? You come with this passion. This passion is going to fuel you to go the extra mile. We love the fact that entrepreneurs, kind of bring everything to it. They leave it all out on the field, right? They're going to put everything, all of their resources, their time and their treasure and their talent all into making this business successful. And I think the absence of that, will likely mean it's going to be a mediocre investment at best. And so that is a starting point and what you want to see, because that creates real alignment, right? As an investor, what you want a lot of is that someone who is committed to making this successful, more so than you are. Even if you're bringing most of the capital, you want that person's, whatever that alignment looks like, you want it to like show through because of the passion that an individual has. But you start there and you say, what are the other ways? Because again, the numbers of businesses that fail, the numbers of ideas that never really get off the ground is a big number. More fail than succeed. And so what you want to do is to try to figure out, not through, in the analysis, if you rely completely on that, you probably will get to the wrong answer as well, because that doesn't tell you, the numbers don't tell you everything. But it actually starts to give you a foundation around how do you analyze one opportunity versus another, because that's really important. There's not an unlimited amount of capital. So you're trying to figure out where might one stack up better. And then what are kind of the things that are in place that hopefully will make this successful? Meaning, we talked about entrepreneurs. So again, is it more than just about an individual? Has this individual been able to recruit a whole group of other people that kind of share this passion and that have this talent, such that this team is the right one to be able to execute on the strategy? What is this strategy? I mean, you can be passionate about a lot of things, but what does the environment tell you about this strategy? What does the macro tell you about it? What does the micro tell you about it? I mean, what is the addressable market? What are those things out there that tell you that what might be a small idea now can become a big idea in 10 or 15 years from now? What are the things that you've done to investigate that, to fully understand what the opportunity is? I mean, you really also want to make sure that what you're doing is not a me too. It's not a me too trade, right? It's like, what you're doing, is there enough of a difference there? Is it unique, but not something that's not going to fail, but because there's a market and the like for it? But is it something that you can kind of uniquely come to the table and bring additional perspective and add additional value around it? Because if it's just something that's just kind of somebody else is doing it already, and it's not something where you see, really kind of a compelling value proposition, then maybe there's not a great reason for you to exist. And then, so many other things, kind of go into it. We look at, I mean, again, you can have a new idea, but you want there to be a readily interesting and identifiable path as to how you got there. So you don't have to do the exact same thing you were doing, but whatever this kind of pivot is, or whatever this tangential opportunity is, you want it to be well thought out because of what you learned from this other thing. And this other thing becomes the thing that you've done already, that becomes your track record, really kind of watching what happened there, what happened from start to finish. And finish to me is generally kind of how did you make money with it or not? Because making money with it can't always just be an idea. What kind of money did you create for yourself and your investors? Because at the end of the day, all of us are investing somebody else's money, right? Our family's money or our investors, other investors' money. And so as a fiduciary, you're trying to figure out what of these investments, what's the team, what's the strategy, what's the process, what's the alignment of interest, what's the idea that are most going to get you to that point of great risk-adjusted returns.
So I have a couple of questions, but one thing I wanted to make sure that we landed on, strategy. Pat, if you had to just give a simple definition of strategy, what would that be? And then also, when you're talking about defining a market, like what is a market for folks who are wondering as budding entrepreneurs?
Right. So the strategy is kind of what you're going to do, what you're planning on doing, what's the idea, and how you're going to do it. Right. The strategy kind of gets to, it's kind of a big picture. I see this is an opportunity, and this is how I'm going to develop this opportunity. And the reason why the market goes along with that if this strategy and if this idea that you have is small, meaning the addressable market is, you've got, a coffee shop. Let's say it's that. A coffee shop is all well and good, but a coffee shop is going to really address folks that are kind of walking by, maybe 1 out of 20 people that are walking by that are going to come there. That should take a very different amount of capital than something that's going to address all 20 of those people, right, that might be walking by. Or a business that is, and then the strategy also contemplates, what if the expectations that you've assumed, what if they don't occur? What's your strategy for making sure that this business is still successful? One of the things that happens oftentimes with small businesses is that, especially small businesses, they don't have enough capital. They don't stress test their business plan or their strategy enough to make sure that if that 1 out of 20 people becomes 1 out of 40 or 1 out of 50 people walking by, you making sure you have the necessary capital to sustain yourself until you get to the 1 out of 20. That is a big, big challenge, especially for smaller businesses, is making sure that you plan for the downside. That should be part of the strategy, not just all roads go to heaven. You hope they do. But how is it? What happens when you get to these bumps in the road? What happens when things don't go as they plan? How has your strategy kind of contemplated that? And then the addressable market is just kind of how big can it be? How big can it be? Should definitely level set you in terms of what resources you need to have around the table. That's certainly from an investment standpoint. And how do you want to scale that investment in over time, based on what that addressable market is, and how might you be able to grow that market, and being very realistic with what those ideas are, because that addressable market times what your individual price point is, that's going to tell you what the business can be long term. And then you have to stress test that. You have to sensitize that on the downside for, what if the addressable market is half of what I think it is, and what if I don't get the number of people that I think I was going to.
No, that's extremely helpful for like training the mind of what entrepreneurs should think about. Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So can you talk about your strategy? It doesn't have to be for the current business idea. It can be of any of your business ideas, but name one of your business strategies and talk about how you thought about the market for that strategy.
Let's see. Well, I think, like, as I said already, I'm all about media, the emerging media. That's what brought me to New York. I think, that is part of what makes New York City great. I am really looking forward to being a part of kind of rebuilding what media companies will look like and be in New York City. And I think to be able to do that, quite honestly, we're going to have to get rid of, previously used strategies. I don't think that they typically worked in the past. I mean, if you look at even a really great study that Harvard did, I'm going to say about maybe 8 years ago, maybe a little bit less, 80% of what investors invest in goes south. So, clearly the models that we're kind of being given and told and you have to adhere to and all that, if they work, they would really be, I think the success rate would be a lot better. I know if I only did 80% of my job well every day, I'd, be living on the street corner. So whenever I think strategy, I always try and think out of the box, because I don't intend to fail. Nobody does, but for sure, if you try and go the route that you're told, if it doesn't feel organic to you, you probably will end up going south. So for me, my strategy is always to be able to see who do I already know within my kind of network who maybe has different kind of intellectual capital that I don't, that I need to be able to leverage, to be able to, or add, to be able to get to my goal. Who do I know who I can tap to be able to kind of do that? Or it might be who could be able to give me different access to relationships. Those are really my strategies, I guess, to be able to partner. If I had to, kind of distill it, who can you partner with that is very powerful to help you move as fast as you can? Because you can actually do things step by step. I don't think we're in that era anymore, or at least not for me and what I'm looking to do, to be able to take that time to build up something one, kind of increment and crumb at a time. That's just not also very interesting to me. So I have to look at, well, what kind of maybe corporation is there that has an innovation lab that might be interested in talking, to be able to see how I can help them meet their goals as well as mine. My strategy is always going to kind of be more like that, because I am looking for very large resources and a large kind of hit or a pop that, you just can't simply do. It doesn't work like that, kind of on your own. So, from my strategy, and also I'm advice, if you're asking me to give it, is, for those who are looking to, what is it? Isn't there actually an African proverb that says, if you want to go far, go together. You know what I'm trying to say.
No, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together.
So I think, that kind of really, it pertains to this, and maybe kind of customizing that, right? Because, I have in the past with my first two businesses really just built each and every scenario one at a time. And it can become very tedious, even though it's very rewarding. But I think, depending on what you want to be able to do next, strategic partners and the strategy to get to those, leveraging your current network or being able to create some kind of interest around what it is that you're doing, I think that that's critical for entrepreneurs, especially because we're going to have so much to catch up on. And I think I just saw a statistic that said, 200 Black families would need 228 years to catch up to the wealth of white families. I don't think we have time to build one like increment at a time. I also saw an article yesterday, I think in Politico, that said one of the biggest challenges that President-elect Biden will face in office is the massive now wealth gap between, the races. So yes, for me, and Caucasian and African Americans didn't even speak about other demographics of color, which I'm sure is just a huge chasm as well. The strategy has to be, how do you get to said point very quickly in a big way that can create stability and lessen risk for those who might be, coming along with you, whether it be financial investment or, intellectual investment. My strategy is, how can I partner with, large corporations that make sense, that I admire, who will also respect me, and we both have a kind of symbiotic relationship there. That's what so my absolute focus is right now.
Extremely helpful. Pat, bringing you in, Lauren talked about communities of color and what's happening to them. Unfortunately, narratives that go back to the founding of this country have made it advantageous for some to discount people of color. You discount the Native Americans that were there; they weren't really there; they didn't own that. Or you could enslave people if you don't treat them as humans. And unfortunately, the residue of that affects even the way we think of people of color in different markets, and even the wealth that's out there. When I was in my former job, I did some market research, and at the time, I think it was 2016, it talked about Nielsen data, talked about how much was out there in African American markets, and it was 1.5 trillion approximately. How much was out there in Latinx markets, and it was like $1 trillion. And so the narratives about being less than or not having access to capital, there is money that's out there if folks find ways to tap into it. But the investor class has to first and foremost see it and then respect it. I've talked about the Madam C.J. Walker moment. She was someone who saw Black women and hair products and said, you know what, I can give a killer product. And so she becomes like, the first, Black woman millionaire. So can you talk to me, Pat, about the Black communities of color, the opportunity that's there, and how can investors or markets really be opened up by people having new narratives of the way they see people?
That is exactly the crux of the matter. I do think that this country, has a really long and unfortunate history around discounting people, especially people that could be characterized as other in any way, and really taking advantage of them. And I think even with the evolution and the improvements that have been made in this country, there's still so far to go. I mean, again, all of these income inequality numbers, all of these wealth disparity numbers really kind of speak to this history of oppression. So, but I mean, I actually, for the first time in my entire professional career, I am more optimistic than I have ever been.
And talk to us about why. We really want to hear.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that, so here's the thing. When I got out of business school, out of Harvard Business School 30 years ago, everyone was talking about the fact that, there was going to be employment and racism and income inequality. All of that was going to close because, there was just going to be a need for, greater diversity. I waited and waited and waited to see this happen. And everything you saw was kind of a drop in the bucket, whether it was employment, whether it was investment, or what have you. In this moment, though, I must say that the things, and people were really quick to say, oh, the reason why we don't have more women or we don't have more people of color or African Americans in our organizations or investing in this is because we can't find any. There aren't any out there. I would say the messages that are coming out of so broadly corporate America and specifically private equity, where I sit, the investment world, whether it's venture capital, whether it's private equity, for the first time, people are holding themselves accountable to metrics. I mean, again, it's almost like quotas. I mean, which again, that's been the bad word for a long time. I've never thought it was a bad word. I thought quotas worked very well. And in fact, when you look at businesses broadly, I mean, people put quotas around all sorts of things. People put quotas around how many calls you have to make, how many deals you have to close, how many investments you have to make. If it matters,
you measure it.
Right?
Measure
why not put quotas around things that you matter? So to me, it was saying that you didn't really want to hold yourself accountable for reaching certain goals and making sure you did it, certain metrics. So, but now I see a completely across the board, from the whitest of shoes of firms, people are out there saying, no, this will, and the ones that have been around for a long time, as well as the ones who've been here for a short amount of time. And so now, again, the proof is in the pudding, and I've been in the business for a long enough time that I don't just believe it. I really have to see it. But for the first time, I think people are being held accountable and holding themselves accountable in a different way, and aren't just happy to say we can't find any. And then the other part of this that I'm seeing too is that all of a sudden now people believe there's a penalty if you don't get it right. I think that people before were, they could say, we tried, hey, what can throw up our hands? That was the best we could do. But now, and know that there was no penalty. First off, there's a penalty for not getting it right, and there's a reward for winning. So I don't know that before either one of those things existed. People didn't think that if you won, anything especially good happened. And then people didn't think if you didn't do it right, you didn't think there was really that much of a penalty. And so the lack of a system of accountability, of carrot and stick, which I think exists now, I see it happening in a way like never before in my entire career.
No, that's so helpful. What is measured is managed. You only manage what you measure, and accountability. That's what it's all about. So we have a question. What programs do you have for young adults, 30 plus, who have the drive for entrepreneurship, but no clue of how it works and where they may be a good fit? So I will ask my panelists if you know of anything, because that's not your day job, but in your walk and roaming the earth and roaming New York City, are there any resources that you know about? And I will go through my mental Rolodex to see if anything comes to mind too.
I can take that one. So if you, I guess you could find it by Google, or certainly if you go to, SBS, Small Business, what's it, Small Business Services, I guess the final S stands for in New York. Anyway, they have this variety of, they're called fast track programs. I believe it's all one word. So it's FAST and then capital TRAC, although don't quote me on the spelling. Or if you go to WENYC, I believe that stands for Women Entrepreneurs New York, which is also part of the city. There are different programs that they have, and they're totally for free. They last several hours per week for maybe, let's say, 8 weeks, something like that. It's originally created by the Kaufman Foundation, which is kind of a leading nonprofit for the study of entrepreneurship, whatever, that the city has kind of bought and then reimagined for, there's a fast track for women over 50. There's a fast track for tech entrepreneurs, etc. I'm sure that might be a good way for you to either kind of start the journey, because you know how it is. You always do one thing, and the next thing you know, 50 steps down the road, you've gotten to where you would need to or want to be. But I would highly recommend that, especially because, low risk, it's free. And then, you can kind of get a good framework around how do you create a pitch, how do you create a business plan, blah, blah. But again, I'm kind of one who's anti those standard things. So, that doesn't work for me, but it might be great if, you're just kind of looking to explore and want to just hear, how these things kind of work or what others kind of think about. I would definitely, recommend kind of researching that out and seeing when the next series of programs start.
So I wanted to see if Pat had any resources.
There we go.
It's right there.
Angie Hancock. Hey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angie. That's a great assist. So a couple of points. Lauren talked about structure. I do think, and Pat talked about passion. I think passion and good practice together is a killer combination. So if you know the fundamentals of putting together a business plan or thinking through a strategy or doing your research and going and learning that from other folks who have done it before, get the boilerplate. It's not the worst thing in the world. And then putting your own spin on it, I think, can make such a huge difference. Specifically, we started the neighborhood business program. It came out of actually one partnership we have with the Westside Community Fund. I want to give a huge shout out to Google, who made an investment that spurred us to give to neighborhood businesses and look to a place where folks were overlooked. Again, people of color, women, immigrants, and trying to prioritize those first and giving them access to resources. And so in giving a grant up to $10,000 of what we're doing made a huge difference. And the second part of it was, there's Grow with Google. So there's some tools that teach people to think about their business in this moment, where being able to do it from a distance is really important, and thinking about innovation. Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, for example, just released a micro loans program. So going to small business associations, empowerment zones, going to their websites and figuring out what grants and loan programs they have, but also the classes will be really helpful in helping people to learn how to get up the learning curve. And most importantly, I think the social capital, being in conversation with other entrepreneurs, will teach you as much as any curriculum in any course. But Pat, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think those are all great ideas. I mean, I think, again, and new stuff is coming out all the time. I mean, again, to the point I was making earlier, I think that a lot of organizations are trying to go back to the fundamentals and recognizing that if you look around, you can't just say there's not a lot of talent right now. How do you actually go out and fundamentally encourage and foster, new and emerging talent? And there's a lot of money that's going into that space.
Great. So do we have any more questions to the producer behind the back scenes? Are there any questions to put up on the screen? As you folks might notice, I'm working multiple devices to try to do this production thing. I'm not necessarily a media person, but COVID has given us all new different skill sets.
Doing great.
Thank you so much.
Not
so
easy.
the other piece that I think I'd love for both of you to speak to is, making money is the way people get access to food and clothing and shelter in this country. So we get that. But there's also leadership and entrepreneurship, businesses and ideas, and seeing people implement them, I think influences culture and influences the way people see themselves. So this is for the both of you. As Black women, there's an intersection of all these identities that are part of you. Can you speak to being successful in your field? What does that mean, do you think, for community? That's number one. And also number two, when businesses of color do well, like, what does that do for the larger community? So I'll start with Pat and then go to Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are looking at any opportunity, you're looking at a job, you're thinking about, if this is for you or not, you want to see yourself in the picture. And what that means is that, one of the things, I've said at my organization and I've said at others is that if you are talking about recruiting new talent, diverse talent, women, underrepresented minorities, broadly, those most talented people, if they look at the head of our organization, if they look at the partners, they look at the board, and they don't see themselves, they will wonder if in fact they can be successful, if this organization is for them. So again, the idea of seeing yourself in the picture is always like, if you or have ever gone to an event, a picnic or whatever, and the pictures come back and everybody's like passing the pictures around. When the pictures are passed around, it's kind of nice to relive the event, but you look at that picture to find yourself. You want to see yourself in the picture. And if you don't see yourself in the picture, you fundamentally think differently about that event or about that organization. And so I think it absolutely matters. It absolutely matters. And I tell you, even as I think about my own career, very seldom have I been in organizations where there were a lot of people that look like me. But for sure, the times when I've been able to be in those places and actually help create some of that, it has fundamentally made my connection to the organization and made my belief and my ability to ascend to the highest level is made me feel very differently. And so, and again, recruiting, again, a lot of folks are always talking about how do we get more people in? One of the reasons why you need to get more people in and your numbers are bad is because you don't keep people. You don't keep people because people don't believe they can be a part of the fabric of the organization that they are part of. And so it is really incumbent, and especially if organizations don't already have the diversity at the top, to really try to be intentional around knowing that people won't necessarily see themselves as part of it. And so you have to do that much more to make sure people feel like this is a place where they can have a home and where they can create and add value. And the same thing for, I always hesitate to say because this is one of the other things that occurs as well, is that when you talk about small businesses, if a business is successful or not, how does it reflect upon the broader community? It does reflect upon the larger community, but you also have to know that you don't want to be in a position as a Black person or as a woman or whatever, carrying the weight of everybody that looks like you. I mean, I have, even now, I was so disappointed. I was mentoring this young man who actually just was doing an internship at one of the investment banks. And he said to me, he says, you know, I go into this investment bank, it's this white shoe firm, and every day I look around, there's nobody there that's gone to an historically Black college. You know, they don't have other Black people there. And so therefore, you know, they are, you know, I feel like I can't, you know, I'm outside of the mix or whatever. And I was like, oh my God. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've been working, you know, for more than almost 3 decades now, so that the folks coming behind me would not feel like they have to carry, every time they go into an organization, carry the whole weight of the Black race on their shoulders for everything that fails. Because you shouldn't, you shouldn't have to do that, right? You shouldn't, nobody, you know, Black groups or white groups, they don't do that, right? So I think you have to give yourself, and organizations have to do that too, right? I mean, it's been very easy to paint people with a broad brush. I mean, it's like Joe and Frank over there, because they're both Black, they must be the same. I think we have to reject that at every time we can, and make sure that, you know, you can actually, you know, again, people can take risks. Sometimes those risks, they're going to succeed, and sometimes they're going to fail. But the person that looks like them should not have to bear the brunt of that person's failure. Otherwise, you're never going to get people that are coming to organizations feeling like they can bring their whole selves, because they're being evaluated based on their ability to create a difference in their organization and create value, as opposed to what every other person that looks like them might have done.
Wow, learning from failure, and I mean, that's natural and that's human, and that's really important. So many bankruptcies happen before folks become millionaires and billionaires, and I think people of color, women, folks that are othered, feeling that they can also benefit and learn from failure, I think is so key. Giving the mental health and the space to do that is so key. We're going to do one last question that's up on the screen. For new entrepreneurs who have never dealt with investors, what are the few core first steps that they should consider as they look for funding outside of their comfort zone? Oh, this is big about like people's networks. Are you in the segregated network, or do you got access to a larger network of resources or traditional means for cash flow? So Pat, if you can answer that, and we'll bring Lauren back in afterwards just to talk about like looking for access to capital and investment, and then we'll go into our closing for this great conversation.
Sure, absolutely. I think first off, you should actually be as specific about especially early on in your business, you should be as specific about the folks, the investors you want in your business, as the investors are about which companies they want to invest in. And what I mean by that is that you should recognize that if you've started a business and it's going fine, you have a tremendous amount of value to bring to the table, and you should not sell it cheaply. And you should not try to align yourselves with investors that don't get you, don't believe in your passion and your dream and know what you're trying to do. Investors that come to the table should hopefully be bringing more than just capital, especially early on. They should bring know-how, because as a new entrepreneur or a recent entrepreneur, what you really want is to have people around the table that can be your official or unofficial board of directors. Who are the folks that when you kind of are faced with a challenge, or you're trying to do something new here, or you're trying to find the right people to add to your team, who are those people that are going to be around the table that are going to help you do that? And the best investors are going to bring some aspect of that value to the table in addition to capital. And I would submit, if it's only capital that they bring to the table, they probably are not going to be able to really add the kind of value that you need as an early investor.
Thick relationships and thick investment as opposed to the thin stuff. I just want your money. I definitely want your advice. I want your partnership. I want you to be able to talk about me and what we're doing to a broader audience to really add. And I think that's a level of partnership that's beyond just the quick transaction. I think that's such great advice. Lauren, talk about
add to that just to maybe help that person just 2 seconds. You can get a lot of all that kind of practice and access and more if you can and want to get yourself into an incubator. That's what incubators are for. So, you know, kind of Google or start to ask around, or you can start with maybe something called the Founders Institute, like that. And then that's part of like why they're there, to be able to help with all of that and more. And it's great, I think, for people who have never really kind of been in those waters before. And you also have like a kind of community of new entrepreneurs too, kind of, as Dr. Harris said as well, bounce ideas off of. But there is no hard and fast thing to this. And I think that's like also what makes it crazy. And just when you think there's like this kind of template, like you'll find so many people who got different things that had nothing to do with that template, right? Nothing to do with it. So, you know, talk to everybody and do what's right for you. But yeah, incubators, that's what I think could be helpful to that person.
So last question that almost serve as the closing statement. New York City, on one side of the coin, some people have left. Folks are concerned about investment, and folks are, you know, nervous. I saw this one article that said tourism is going to take until 2025 to come back to the levels that it was pre-pandemic. The other side of the coin, I think, is entrepreneurship and opportunities, and for folks to pop up in the spaces that have been left unoccupied by others. And there's opportunities for new businesses and new leaders and folks that have been here the whole while to really prosper. So the question is, what are the opportunities that you see that small businesses and investment in people can make in the reimagining and rebuilding of New York City? I'll start with Lauren and then go to Pat.
Well, I guess, you know, my perspective is always going to be like small business, but not from, how would you could define that? I guess like not a retail point of view, small business, but, you know, more of an administrative, you know, type of level. Where do I see opportunities for such businesses? I think
in New York City.
In New York City, I think to kind of maybe pick up on what Pat said maybe during her last statements about why she's so enthusiastic about now, and because there is kind of accountability and carrots and sticks, etc. I think if you're, you know, kind of willing to be very persistent as you need to be all the time, but, you know, now, and go for as senior level as you can. And I have no problem like emailing CEOs and all that. But I think there's a really great opportunity now for service businesses who are run by people of color, women of color, who, you know, really have an offering to be able to kind of say, well, your company brand or corporate X said, you know, you were going to do XYZ about inclusion. I have this to offer. I have XYZ track record, or I see where I could solve this problem or that problem or whatever. We're so blessed to have so many of these corporations right here in our own time zone, in our own city, whether they're working from home, you know, or not. I say to be able to kind of go for that. That's where I see the opportunity for, you know, businesses where, like you said, it was very hard to get up kind of over that very loud narrative of many other companies that are always traditionally hired, traditionally given contracts or whatever. Now people, at least you can get, you know, an email back, or at least you can maybe set up a phone call, right? To be able to see what might happen. It might turn into nothing. It might turn into a referral. It might turn into business down the road. It might not be something that's financial, but something else, or you never know. I had a call with someone who actually worked at a company that I had been trying to get to that I didn't even know she used to work there, and you know, she was able to make that introduction to me. So I just think that there's such a wealth of opportunity right now to be able to just access a lot of these very senior executives at companies where, if you know, you have those types of products maybe as well, but definitely services. And you are, any type of, any other, color, and certainly, woman, at least, kind of put that out there in a, kind of diplomatic way to be able to start those conversations. And I think that that is a very great thing. And that's what I'm, absolutely working to make the most of right now.
That's great. Large corporations, if you want to rebuild New York City, have very big vendor policies that are inclusive and invest in New York City's small businesses, because that will help you invest and bring in New York City back. I think you
and
said
they're all reimagining and restructuring and everything. So in a way, it's very challenging. Like, you have to keep on top of it with them, because the person you're talking to may not be there the next time. But the great thing is that they're open for like the first time and a little bit off center for a variety of reasons, right? Both culturally and financially. So that isn't that when they always say, like, in war, in the art of war, that's when you have you're in, right? If whoever you're targeting is set, that's going to be a little bit challenging. But if they're a little bit rocky, right, you're like, I can maybe get in there, try it. Like, you got to get something, right? There's got to be something that comes through.
Excellent. Pat.
So the two themes, in addition to what Lauren talked about, the two themes that I would highlight would be art and sustainability. So the artists actually had gotten, unfortunately, kind of pushed out of much of New York City because the prices go up. The artists come in first when nobody wants to be here, like in the 70s. The prices go up, and the artists, get pushed further and further out. I think there's a real opportunity now for the artists to come back in, the full gamut of artistry to kind of come back in and really take over and kind of reinvent, some of these spaces, meaning like in buildings within the city, and bring art out and in a way that it hasn't been accessible by the people in a while. I mean, art now, has really is 6 and 7 figures, oftentimes the way that, for it to be accessible. Visual art, performing art, all of those things. And so I think in a very real way, this is going to be a great time for the artists to kind of come back and reclaim the city and hopefully kind of, help reinvent it and make it even better, because art always makes a place better. The second theme I'd bring up is sustainability. I think too, at this reset, sustainability in all of its forms as well is getting another look. How do you reimagine spaces? How do you reimagine the way, the way things that were formerly thrown away? How do you reimagine kind of technologies? How do you reimagine processes? All of these things around, especially, things that were thrown away. What are the best sustainability factors around these various businesses? And how do you kind of create a whole new outlet, a whole new business really kind of around that? I think those are going to be, really some great themes here going forward. And the other thing I would say here is that for the first time, no matter what business you're in, I believe technology is reducing the cost, or should reduce the cost of getting into that business and staying in that business. It used to be many businesses, you needed to, really have a lot of capital, upfront capital, to be able to get into business and to be able to maintain it. Now, as you go into it, or whatever business you're thinking about starting, is that what are the things that can be outsourced through technology that'll be a high-end, meet compliance thresholds, meet quality thresholds, or whatever, but that will mean that instead of you needing to invest a lot of money up front in order to have the best, you can actually use what you need and actually pay for it, as you go, as you use it. So I think those three things actually are really going to create a fantastic opportunity for New York City, because the DNA is there. I think that, we have gotten a hit in the gut. I mean, all the things that have made New York City special and made people want to be here all the time, a lot of those things are being questioned, right? And so but I do think that this is going to be an opportunity now for those people that might have gotten pushed to the margins. I think there's going to be a great opportunity for them to come back in and be front and center around what will the new and reimagined New York City look like.
That is such amazing imagery to end on. Taking people who are pushed to the margins and centering the conversation in a space where they can benefit and that they are seen and valued. And I think the whole idea of thinking really hyper locally about what are the thriving businesses that keep communities healthy and inspired, the art that helps form culture, and New York City being, one of the most diverse and definitely the greatest city in the world, there's just so many natural human resources for us to do well. And it's just a matter of us believing in it and operationalizing it and make sure that we include everybody at the table to get there. So thank you for this conversation. That's really inspired this thinking. Want to remind folks that these conversations are brought by our fantastic donors and sponsors. It allows us to have thought leadership. It allows us to get out grants to local businesses and local leaders. And we want to make sure that you spread the word about what we're doing. There are many resources that are on our newsletter and on our website, and we look forward to seeing you really soon. It is the holiday season. It is a perfect time to support a small business, a business of color, lift them up. And I think by lifting them up, we're lifting all of ourselves up together. So thank you so much for this conversation. Again, Pat and Lauren, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for including us. I mean, this was just really great. And I'm just so glad that you guys put these types of events together, because it is really important to be able to kind of just, share from different points of view. Also, too, for any entrepreneurs in the space that I am talking about, entertainment, media, and technology, if you want to stay updated on this initiative that I am launching with my partner, it's called Game Change. So if you want to go to Game Change Project, spelled the traditional way, .org to sign up for updates. Happy to be able to have you, and we'll be providing a lot of insight, like to the questions that are answered here around incubators, et cetera, et cetera. We know so much of this stuff, and we're just looking to be able to share that with other entrepreneurs of color in the space who are women. It's time. Like you both have said, we've been outside the margins for too long, and so it's important for the regrowth and rebirth of our city.
Thank you so much. Excellent. And this is the reason why entrepreneurs come to us. We're a platform. Get at Citizens Committee. You can be a platform. We can get the word out, and that's what this is all about. So thank you again, Pat and Lauren.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very nice
Bye,
to meet you.
guys.
Take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.